to Stars and Gripes, where we tear apart the actions of the bitter activists masquerading as journalists in the United States. The Trump-Musk bromance was alive and well this week in an interview with Sean Hannity. Here's a snippet.
Elon called me. He said, you know, they're trying to drive us apart. I said, absolutely. No, they said, we have breaking news. Donald Trump has ceded control of the presidency to Elon Musk. President Musk will be attending a cabinet meeting tonight at 8 o'clock. And I say, it's just so obvious. They're so bad at it. I used to think they were good at it. They're actually bad at it, because if they were good at it, I'd never be president.
What is the relationship, Mr. President?
Well, I respect him. I've always respected him. I never knew that he was right on certain things, and I'm usually pretty good at this stuff. He did Starlink. He did things that were so advanced and nobody knew what the hell they were. I wanted somebody really smart to work with me in terms of the country, a very important aspect. Because, I mean, he doesn't talk about it. He's actually a very good businessman. He's got some very brilliant young people working for him that dress much worse than him, actually.
Yeah,
they dress in just T-shirts. You wouldn't know they have 180 IQ.
Wait a minute. So he's your tech support.
No, he is.
I actually
but he's
am
much
tech
more
support.
than that.
Yeah. I actually am tech support, though. But
he gets it done. He's a leader.
Yeah.
Of course, the left-wing media lost their minds. The Atlantic led with who's running the United States, Musk or Trump? In an interview with Sean Hannity, three men demonstrated that they have no idea how American democracy works. And of course, our friends at The Guardian packaged the interview up with this headline: Musk and Trump put on love fest with Sean Hannity, pay glowing tribute to each other, rejecting claims that billionaire is usurping president's limelight and power. Joining me now with her analysis is Sky News contributor Kosha Gada. Kosha, this pair just seemed to set the media off, and it feels like they haven't quite worked out yet how to report on it.
Indeed, they are clearly finding their feet, Caroline, and they're out in the wilderness after their resounding defeat in the last election. And you could see that they're sort of trialing a couple of different narratives here. One is the who's running the country, he's an unelected bureaucrat argument, as you mentioned, at the top. And that doesn't make sense to most people, because everybody knows that there are pretty much 537 people out of 2.4 million people that are elected in the U.S. government, 435 congressmen and women, 100 senators, one vice president, one president. Everybody else, 2.4 million people, are by definition unelected bureaucrats who serve at the pleasure of those that are elected. Musk just happens to be one of them, but he is a public figure, so they're toying with that idea. And then the other one, I think, is just sort of plain leveraging this idea that people have about billionaires, just good old-fashioned envy or ire, or people look at billionaires with suspicion, so they're trying to play that angle. And I don't think that works over here either, because Trump remains very popular at the moment, may not last forever, but he's got the strongest popularity he's ever had and approval ratings he's ever had. And Musk is by and large regarded as a very high IQ individual who is working for free to try and fix the country. So I think that narrative overpowers the one that they're trying to push forward.
And this week, a Delta plane crashed on landing in Toronto. You've probably seen the footage. In reporting on the crash, The View had this spectacularly bad take.
I have been panicking over all this insanity with these planes.
Yeah.
You know, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. Like, so let's start with the string of mass firings by Elon Musk's Doge has sparked a lot of chaos, confusion, and fear.
Ex-MSNBC host Mehdi Hasan, well, he posted this shocker on X before thinking better of it and deleting it. And then the Delta CEO had this to say.
I understand that the cuts at this time are something that are raising questions, but the reality is there's over 50,000 people that work at the FAA, and the cuts, I understand, were 300 people, and they were in non-critical safety functions. The Trump administration has committed to investing deeply in terms of improving the overall technologies that are used in the air traffic control systems and modernizing the skies. They've committed to hiring additional controllers and investigators.
Kosha, that all sounds pretty rational to all the same people, but so many of the progressive outlets, they just appear to be so obsessed with Trump that the own goals just produce themselves.
Yes, Mehdi Hassan has become an NPC, as they say, a non-playing character for quite some time. His show on MSNBC was canceled, and he's said things like that in the past and has had to take them down. And that's fine. That's his prerogative, and he'll pay the price for it in the public square. The View argument it does reflect a little bit that the other side and those who oppose Trump's policies have to work with, and that is that these cuts are happening. Doge is very much front and center in the national discourse right now and all that they're doing. And these plane crashes have happened in the last 3 weeks more than they typically have. The two are not connected, but you can see how they can try to make that connection for those that maybe aren't paying attention to these details. So that's what they're trying to do. But what the Delta CEO said there is the fact. There's 50,000 plus people who work, again, all unelected bureaucrats to the earlier point, in the FAA. They've cut about 400 to 500 people in non-essential roles. As that narrative becomes known and gets out there, coupled with what the administration is trying to do to improve the technology that's like from the 1960s in terms of the programming languages and other things that they use, and they turn the ship around, I think ultimately history will judge them well if they're successful in what they're doing. But in the meantime, as these crashes happen, coupled with the cuts that they're doing, you will see people trying to connect the two and push that narrative out there.
And that wasn't the only belly flop this week. On to CBS anchor and general battler Margaret Brennan, who we all remember as being on the receiving end of Vice President J.D. Vance's "I don't really care" Margaret retort. Well, she's at it again. This time she's struggling with her historical understanding of the political landscape in Nazi Germany.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany.
Kosha, look, Rubio was very good here in pulling her up, but a very conflated and confounded question that frankly shouldn't have been asked in the first place.
Yes, that one was something new, to be sure. And just to have an American journalist, where America, of course, is home to the First Amendment and the strongest free speech protection in the free world and all of the world, for an American journalist to make that claim that free speech was the root cause of the Holocaust, as she did, was a sight to behold. And you could even see Secretary Rubio for a moment couldn't even believe what he heard with his ears. He was finding his words a little bit, and then when he just went off, that thing has gone viral, probably second only to the "I don't really care" Margaret. So she's certainly dug herself in a bit of a ditch that she's going to have to work hard to pull herself out of.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, in a general sense, it goes without saying the media is struggling to cope with the change of the US administration, including simple things like the change of the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Well, Kosha, it caused the Associated Press to come a cropper this week. What happened?
So this is interesting because there's a couple things going on where Trump famously, in one of the 241 executive orders that he signed literally after he took his hand off the Bible and assumed the role of the president, was to rename some of these iconic pieces of geography in and around America. One was Mount Denali in Alaska, the highest peak in Alaska, to Mount McKinley, which is what it used to be known as, and then the other is the Gulf of Mexico, should be the Gulf of America. Now, most those things are being battled, and even in Congress, actually, some people are challenging it. But as of now, he has the authority to do that. And then basically all maps and school textbooks and things that come out of the federal government can reflect a presidential order, as they have. And in the private company sphere, Google and Apple, who have far more eyeballs coming to them, have also done it. You can go to Google Maps right now, it'll say Gulf of America. Airline pilots, when they're flying over the space and they want to talk about it, they're giving it that same credit. But the AP has decided to sort of split the hair over there and say that since that's a global body and international countries are maybe not all accepting this renaming, they will not either. And then Trump is now pushing back and saying, okay, that's your prerogative, but then I'm not going to invite you into the Oval when we're doing press briefings. So that's kind of turned into this whole story unto itself. Yes, it's about the Gulf of America, but it's also about putting adversarial media in their place in a way that he believes he has the right to do. There are plenty of other reporters who are allowed access to the Oval Office, but he's certainly punishing the AP for holding out on this name change.
Well, it has been very eventful to watch. And speaking of the struggling to cope, I often wonder, Kosha, how history is going to look back on this crazy, crazy time. And this Washington Post headline just says it all for me. Trump says there are two sexes. Experts and science say it's not binary. Is the US mainstream media ever going to be able to unbreak itself?
This particular example, Caroline, would suggest that they're far from reaching that point. While some things might have some merit on the other side, and the renaming topic that we just discussed with the AP, that's one thing. But this one, are there two biological sexes or not, is one of the few issues in these divided times that we live in where something like 89% of people agree with that. Like the cultural consensus around this has finally happened. It's crazy what it took to get here, but we are here. And for the media to still be behind the 8 ball as they are on this issue in particular, and there are others as well, you're right, it is crazy times. And I think when historians look back on this era, it's going to be fascinating for them to see where the media went and how far we've fallen.
And I think people in a general sense are a little more sceptical of experts and science than they were perhaps prior to COVID. So I'm not sure that they're necessarily helping themselves there. Now, lastly, Joe Rogan has claimed that the Harris campaign is trying to cover its backside, my words, not his, about why the then Vice President didn't do an interview on his show. Now, Rogan maintains he offered interviews to both her and Trump. Kosha, is this just late-stage revisionism?
It potentially is, and the other side, Harris's campaign managers have gone on different podcasts, breaking open the minutiae of the back-and-forth email exchanges that happened, claiming she was willing to do it, and scheduling got in the way and whatnot. But whatever it is, I don't think either path or either narrative comes out with her looking good, because either it looks like she was hubristic and thought she didn't need the biggest podcast in the world in that election cycle, even though Trump had the sense to do it, or it means that she wanted to do it, she recognized how important he is, but they couldn't make it work in terms of scheduling, which also makes her look weak. Like, surely if you wanted to do it, you can find a way. So I'm not sure it matters anymore. No one's really paying attention to her, but her campaign managers are still people who have careers in politics, and so they're trying to explain that away, and we might see a little bit more of it before the story finally lands in the dustbin of history where it belongs.
Absolutely, it does. Kosha Gada, thank you so much for your analysis this evening.